Hello, Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is your first time visiting me. Today we are doing a tarot and oracle deck dupes video, and this one is going to be a special one because today we're going to be talking about out of print tarot and oracle decks and the decks that I think can kind of dupe the feeling of those decks. Now let me be clear, there's no way to actually duplicate a tarot oracle deck, at least not ethically or legally. So what we're trying to do here is actually dupe the vibes. This is a deck series that I decided to start partly because the issue right now in the tarot and oracle deck community is that counterfeits are rampant. Counterfeits are terrible for our industry. They are chasing tarot deck creators and artists out of the space, which we hate to see. It's a real problem. And in an effort to sort of, I guess, demonstrate that sometimes if you can't get a deck, there's something that could potentially work just as well that you can legally and ethically purchase and use and have no guilt about it whatsoever. I just want to talk about alternatives. And particularly when we're talking about decks that are out of print, we're talking about decks that are very difficult to get. And if you can get them on eBay or on the secondhand marketplace, the asking prices are often astronomical. So we're going to be talking about some highly sought after out of print decks and what I'm going to do to demonstrate the amount of money you can save by choosing an alternative instead of buying these highly priced secondhand out of print decks is I'm going to demonstrate the price savings by sharing with you the last known selling price I could find. So where possible, I'm sharing with you the last price that one of these out of print decks actually sold for on eBay. Or if I couldn't find that, I looked for the last price an actual real person was asking for this out of print deck. And then I'll share with you the price of the alternative I'm suggesting. Now, unlike my prior episode of Tarot and Oracle dupes where I shared only mass market alternatives, because we're duping out of print decks, most of these alternatives will be independent decks or there might be one or two mass market actually. But the point is I was looking for any deck you could currently buy because that's always going to be cheaper than an out of print secondhand deck unless you get very lucky. So you're still going to save money either way, but I wanted to show alternatives. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I'm going to scoot over actually so that we have space for me to pop up images of the decks that we're talking about. So hold on one sec while I get myself arranged. There, that should give me adequate space to pop up an image of the deck that we're talking about. There are one or two of these out of print decks that I do own, but just to keep the video cohesive, I'm just going to stick with pictures for the sake of the video. So let's start off with one of the most highly sought after out of print tarot decks, and that is the Tarot of Delphi. This is a deck based on existing art, so it is a curated deck. So J.D. Hildegard Hinkle, the creator of Tarot of Delphi, curated art pieces and cropped them in, maybe made some slight adjustments. I couldn't tell you technically how the deck was created, but I know that it uses traditional, like already pre-existing art. And many of these cards depict Greek figures. So Greek mythological figures, there's a lot of Greek mythology present in the deck. So this is highly sought after because it's just freaking beautiful and it sells for very high prices in the secondhand market. The last copy I found sold on eBay for $548.34 US. I'd like to offer the alternative, the Beautiful Rebellion Tarot. When this came out, when I first heard about this was before I managed myself to get a copy of the Tarot of Delphi. This was the deck I was going to buy. The main difference that I noticed between the Beautiful Rebellion and the Tarot of Delphi, which I think have a very similar vibe, is that the Beautiful Rebellion seems to feature more primarily feminine figures, whereas I think you see a little bit more balance in the Tarot of Delphi. Both decks are absolutely beautiful, and Beautiful Rebellion Tarot is available on Make Playing Cards for $62 US. So if you were to purchase Beautiful Rebellion Tarot, instead of spending an out-of-print price for the Tarot of Delphi, you'd be saving $486.34 US. Now this is probably a good point to interject that I am using US pricing just so that it's even across the board. I recognize we're not all in the US and the prices that things go for in your country or where you're located may be different. I myself am in Canada, so I understand, but I just wanted to give US prices so that it's just, we all are talking about the same dollar amount. Also, unlike my last dupes video, I did not include shipping prices in these figures because I didn't want to have it skew the numbers. Unfortunately, secondhand marketplace shipping prices where they're set by the seller can be all over the map, and it just didn't feel fair to include that in the amounts. So this is just the price for decks, and so I didn't include the shipping in the alternative deck either. So just be aware that the prices I'm sharing are the deck price as of the time I'm filming. Okay, so since we're talking about J.D. Hildegard Hinkle, we should probably talk about the Majestic Earth Tarot. This is a beautiful deck, and if you were lucky enough to snag a copy of this when it was available, great for you, that's awesome. The Majestic Earth Tarot seems really special because it's got, and is really special because it's all landscape art. So just like the Tarot of Delphi, the Majestic Earth Tarot features landscape art, so curated art, and the images are gorgeous. It really has a beautiful aesthetic to it, and if you really are wanting to be drawn into landscape like images, this is just such a transportive deck. I'm not knocking it, it's absolutely beautiful. The last time that I saw a copy sell on eBay, it sold for $229.17 US. Better than the Tarot of Delphi, but not awesome. The alternative I'd like to present is the Naturescapes Tarot. This one is also available on makeplayingcards.com, and it sells for a whopping $26.65 US. It's also really beautiful. I think takes you right into nature. And frankly, if I didn't already own a copy of the Majestic Earth Tarot, I would scoop this up in a heartbeat. I think it's really, really beautiful. Granted, it's not curated art, it is photography, but I think it's well worth the spend. And considering that if you were to go with this particular alternative, you would save a whopping $202.52 US. I think it's well worth your consideration if you've been vying after the Majestic Earth. The next out-of-print tarot deck I want to talk about is the Healing Waves Tarot. This one got a lot of attention for a while, and I certainly saw copies going for astronomical amounts, especially when this deck first went out of print. I think part of the draw for this one is that it was really soft and beautiful watercolor art. The artist used ocean water to activate their watercolors, which just felt special and gave it like something extra. I myself was super passionate about this project when I first found out about it, but I think one of the things that sort of drove the out-of-print market prices to go completely bonkers is that the creator made it very clear from the very beginning that they were only going to do one printing of the deck. That was it. They were going to move on to other projects. So once the original copies from the Indiegogo campaign were gone, they were gone, and then they became highly sought after. Now, the Healing Waves Tarot I've seen go for wild prices, but in the interest of fairness, I still used the most recent sold for price that I could find on eBay, and that amount was $151.43. Now, I know that decks have sold for more than that, but we're going to stick with that for fairness. The deck I'd like to present as an alternative is the Oceanum Arcana, the Ocean Tarot. This is by Taylor Hultquist Todd, I believe is the name, and this one is also really beautiful. It's ocean themed. It actually came out at around the same time as the Healing Waves Tarot. It has a darker vibe to it, but there's a lot of similar choices as far as creatures that show up in this particular deck. And if you're looking for something that has that oceany energy, this definitely fits the bill. Again, we can't perfectly dupe these decks, but this one could be what you're looking for if you've been looking for an ocean themed deck that isn't all mermaids and such. This could be a really, really good one. Now this one goes currently for $65 US on the creator's website, which I will have linked down below along with the links for the other alternates that I'm suggesting here. So if you were to buy this one instead of the Healing Waves, assuming you could get the Healing Waves as low as $151, which let's be honest, doubtful, but if you could, you'd still be saving $86.43. The next one we're going to talk about is another curated art deck. Now it's curated art, but that art has been, I think, manipulated to some degree. Somebody who knows more maybe can enlighten us in the comments. I think there's some manipulation. I don't know if the images are just like cropped and then like, I don't know what all's been done is what I'll say. But this is the Fantastic Menagerie Tarot. Now this one was out of print for a long time, was somewhat recently reprinted and is out of print again. The last price that I saw one selling for on eBay, and it is the newest edition, was $314.05. Now this deck features the work of J.J. Granville. I always want to call him J.J. Abrams, which is a totally different guy. Anyways, features the art of J.J. Granville, and it's a beautiful deck, don't get me wrong. But there's a very, very close alternative, and it is called the Metamorphosis du Jour Tarot. Now, I've had both of these decks in my collection at various points, and as far as I'm concerned, I preferred the choices of the Metamorphosis du Jour Tarot over the choices made in which pieces of J.J. Granville's work to show in which cards. I preferred the choices in Metamorphosis du Jour over the Fantastic Menagerie. And in fact, even when both decks were in print, the Le Metamorphosis du Jour Tarot was still cheaper than the Fantastic Menagerie. But now that the Fantastic Menagerie is out of print, it's a bigger savings indeed, because the Metamorphosis du Jour Tarot, which you can still get from Taroko Studios, is $62 US. So if you were to buy that instead of the Fantastic Menagerie at an out of print price, you'd be saving $252.05. What a bargain. This next dupe is close to my heart because both of these decks I absolutely love, and I didn't think there could ever be a dupe for the Alice Tarot. But I have to tell you, I'm really impressed by the dupe I found. If you've been watching my channel lately, you know already where I'm going with this. But let me tell you a little bit about the Alice Tarot first. This is an Alice-themed deck featuring photographic collage type art. I don't know how much manipulation. Again, I'm not very well versed in the creation method. But the interesting thing about the Alice Tarot is that in the guidebook, the creator of the deck went into detail about which part of the story is showing up in each card. And I really enjoyed the choices, and I've gotten very fond of the Alice Tarot, I have to admit. But it is out of print. Now, this one I believe is going to be reprinted at some point in the future, but currently the asking price is $573.27, at least the last deck that sold on eBay from the most recent edition. Wow. And I'd like to point out that even when this deck comes back into print, this particular creator's decks tend to go for pretty high prices to begin with. Meanwhile, there is a beautiful mass market Alice in Wonderland themed tarot called Tarot in Wonderland by Barbara Moore, and I have been blown away by this deck. Not only is the deck absolutely adorable and has wonderful choices if you're familiar with the Alice in Wonderland stories, but the guidebook by Barbara Moore is incredibly comprehensive. It is the heaviest and thickest guidebook from a Llewellyn tarot deck set that I've ever owned, and this is a mass market deck. Barbara goes into incredible detail about why every choice was made for these cards and shares quotes from the stories. You'll see some of the original illustrations in the Llewellyn guidebook. You will see great detail gone into for every card. And I filmed a full on, like super intense deep dive walkthrough for this deck that I just put up on my channel earlier this month. So I will link that up in the cards for you and in the description box down below so that you can check it out. I am very impressed by this deck. And for $27.44 US, you literally can't go wrong. So if you were to get this deck instead of buying the out of print Alice Tarot, you would be saving $545.83. And I think even when the higher priced Alice Tarot is back in print sometime in the future, you'll still be saving like maybe $50 or $60 at least to go with the mass market Tarot in Wonderland. And I think it's a very, very well done deck. So if you're looking for a very high quality, true to the stories, beautiful Alice in Wonderland themed tarot deck, I don't think you can go wrong with the Tarot in Wonderland. This next deck is one that I've never had in my possession or owned, but I have looked at it in person. It is the Mesquite Tarot. This is such a sweet deck, and I remember being surprised when it went out of print. I don't remember why exactly, just that I had been used to seeing it in the indie section of my local tarot shop for so long that I was just surprised when it wasn't available any longer. I think a lot of people are drawn to this one for its minimalist art style, and it has this kind of muted color palette that's really unique. It's a sweet deck and it's adorable. But the last time that it sold on eBay, it sold for a whopping $196 US, which is not inexpensive. The deck that I think dupes the vibes of the Mesquite Tarot the best is the Homebound Tarot. This is an indie deck and it sells for $60 US. So if you get this one instead, which I think also has a very similar palette, very calming to look at, a little bit minimalist, it really feels similar to me. Of course, it's not the same deck, but it is very similar to me. If you get this one, it's $60 US, which means that you are saving $136. Not savings to sneeze at for sure. This next one I have owned, and actually, funny story, I rehomed it when it was out of print in favor of the in-print dupe for this deck. So I think my opinion on this is super valid. But anyways, this is the Heart of Fairies Oracle by Brian Froud. Now, I had Brian Froud's Fairies Oracle when it first came out, and when the Heart of Fairies Oracle came out, I was delighted and scooped it up right away. Actually, in the first few years of owning both decks, I found that I preferred the Heart of Fairies Oracle, but at a certain point in my practice, it flipped, and I preferred Brian Froud's Fairies Oracle instead. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself because you can probably already guess what the dupe is, but the Heart of Fairies Oracle has a different feeling. The art has a slightly different vibe. It was created with Brian Froud and his wife, whereas the first deck was created with Brian Froud and I can't remember her name, but I'll put it up on the screen. And so they have a very different feel. All told though, the Heart of Fairies Oracle is highly sought after, and the last time that I saw a copy sell on eBay, it sold for $229.29 US. The Fairies Oracle is still in print, is still mass market, and sells for $22.75 US. I really love the original Fairies Oracle. I think the guidebook goes into much more depth, and I feel like there's a rawness to that first deck that just doesn't quite translate to Heart of Fairy. So for me, Fairy is the tried and true. It's the one that has stood the test of time for me no matter what. And while I feel like it takes a little more effort to get to know initially, it really holds up over time. And if you choose the Fairies Oracle, instead of trying to snag the Heart of Fairies Oracle, you'll save $206.54 US. Can't complain. This next one is an oddball because it's regularly out of print, but then it comes back in print in a slightly different variation. So the thing is, I don't love the hype around this. It's the Yonasa Jaus Tarot. And so the thing about this is that the creator does a version of this deck and then it goes out of print and then a new version comes out and it might be a slightly different shape or size or have a different color palette, but essentially it's the same deck over and over again. And it sells out super fast and then that version is out of print and then it's selling for crazy out of print prices. The last Jonasa Jaus deck that I saw on eBay that sold for $171.87. And partly I don't get the hype on this deck. I really don't. And I know a lot of people love it. I think it's objectively beautiful. It's just so far from my personal style that I have a hard time relating to the hunger for this deck. And I have to admit, I also get a little put off by regularly like it going out of print and then a new version comes out. And I think that if this was a deck that I was really drawn to, I'd probably just wait till the next time it's in print and get whatever version is out then. Then again, if you're drawn to a particular color palette, I can totally see wanting that particular version. But if you like this sort of color palette, if you enjoy the sort of grungy tones of the Yonasa Jaus that I've seen, I don't know that this is a perfect dupe, but I think that the Tarot of the Holy Spectrum actually scratches a lot of the same itches. I talked about this in a previous video. I have had my hands on the other deck by Yonasa Jaus, the Stunning Tarot, and I had a chance to get to know that a little bit. I'm still sort of feeling my way through it, but I still feel like Tarot of the Holy Spectrum somehow seems to hit a lot of the same notes. And I don't know that I can fully explain why, because I feel like their art style is quite different. I don't know if it's the colors. I don't know if there's something about the flavor of the deck in general when you work with it. Maybe somebody can back me up in the comments because I got backed up on this before. But the Tarot of the Holy Spectrum just feels like it just hits a lot of those places that the Yonasa Jaus or the Stunning Tarot by the same creator seems to hit. So, talking about dollars, the last time a Yonasa Jaus sold, it sold for $171.87 US. The Tarot of the Holy Spectrum is currently selling for $50 US. So if you choose that deck, if you feel like it could possibly do the same thing for you, you're going to be saving $121.87. Not bad. Oh, this next one is really interesting to me because I have this deck and I'm still sort of on the fence if I'm going to be keeping mine, and I've gotten a lot of messages about it just in case I decide to let it go. But for now it's staying, partly because it's really difficult to get again, apparently, but it's the Color Mage Oracle. Now, this is a really unique deck, and I really think it brings value to the space, but it gets a lot of crap too for being essentially swatches of color with titles and keywords on it, which in theory is true, but there's a strong system around it. I feel like it was really well thought out, and while the art style is incredibly simple, I've had a lot of fun working with this deck. I've used it for chakra readings and I've used it for playing with color, whether it's picking out a color palette for a coloring page in an adult coloring book or just generally wanting to lean into the energy of a color and see what it had to teach me. So I think it's a powerful and beautiful deck, don't get me wrong, but the last asking price for it was $475 US, which in my opinion is way too much. So that's just my opinion. If this is your thing and it really scratches an itch for you and that's great for you, cool. But if you're like, I want a color deck, but I don't want to pay that, can I just introduce you to the energetics of color? I've talked about this recently on my channel. I found this through Dawn Michelle. Actually, I was visiting her. She had this, I saw it, I fell in love. And for me, this actually has replaced the Color Mage Oracle in practical application for readings. And in fact, I found it easier to work with and more versatile in many ways than the Color Mage Oracle was for me personally. And it's currently available. It's an indie deck and it sells for $55 US. I mean, incredible. The artwork on it is beautiful. There's a lot more to each image. There's great keywords on every single card and a swatch of the color. So you can work with it just on a color basis, or you can really lean into the artwork, or you can lean into the keyword. It just gives it a lot of flexibility, and I think it's a really great deck. So if you were to pick this over the out-of-print Color Mage, you'd be saving $420 US. Whew. All right. The last one is a deck that I also have never owned, and it is the Blood Moon Tarot. This was one of those decks where I really went back and forth. I was watching this deck when it first launched on Kickstarter and considered backing it. I was really drawn in by the primary image, which I want to say was the Fool, that was visible on the Kickstarter page. It was really tantalizing and expansive, and I really loved the way that it looked. But something held me back, right? I was like, not sure. And the campaign ended up taking quite a long time, and when it eventually shipped and I started seeing walkthroughs, I was glad I hadn't backed it. It's still absolutely gorgeous, and a lot of people really, really lust after this deck, but the art themes are a little bit dark for me, and it's just not ultimately my taste. That being said, though, the last time I saw one of these sell on eBay was $119.63 US, which may not seem like very much, and I don't think it is very much. I've seen this deck go for much, much higher prices. But just like with the Healing Waves Tarot, I wanted to pull the most recent price just in fairness, because perhaps some of the hype has died down and it's easier to get a less expensive copy. I don't know. Maybe that last person on eBay just got real lucky. Either way, this one is still going for out of print prices and can be difficult to find. On the other hand, there is the Mind's Eye Tarot. This is a new US Games release that I think has a lot of very similar vibes. The artwork has a similar sort of dark and murky color palette, and there's sort of a wild, almost like a wild fae energy to it, which is something that I also see in the Blood Moon Tarot. I think the vibes of this are very similar to the vibes of the Blood Moon Tarot. Granted, the art style different decks for sure, just like with all of these dupes. But if you've been really lusting after the Blood Moon Tarot, this could be an option for you worth exploring. The price for the Mind's Eye Tarot right now on Amazon is $24.26 US. So that means that if you were to purchase this, instead of trying to hunt down an out-of-print copy of the Blood Moon Tarot, you'd be saving at least $95.37. Whew, holy moly. All right, so I know you want the final figure, so let's talk about that. But before I do that, I have a big thank you to share. So this particular video with out of print dupes would definitely not have been possible without the help of my friends and members of this tarot community. So for all of those that submitted possible dupes for out of print decks, or shared something that you thought would make a good dupe, or helped me figure out the most recent like high price somebody was asking for one of these out of print prices, thank you so much for all of your help. It really helped me put this together. To be honest, some of these I'm not as familiar with, and so I really relied on you all to help me figure out the best dupe. Now, of course, if you know of a good dupe for a high priced indie deck or another out of print deck, please feel free to hit me up in the comments or drop me an email or a DM on Instagram. I think my next dupes video will be focused on dupes for indie decks again. We'll be looking at mass market equivalents or similar decks. I like doing this series for a number of reasons, and I want to be very, very clear. I am a huge supporter of indie decks. I am an indie deck creator myself. I am passionate about our indie deck creators community. This video and this series is not designed to crap on the indie deck community. It's actually designed to support the indie deck community, because the biggest threat to indie deck creators right now are counterfeit decks. And if I can help in some small way to just show people that there are alternatives that are not counterfeit, unauthorized copies, that they can get that need met from a different deck that's just more affordable, I would love to be able to do that. Again, it's the counterfeit industry that is hurting the tarot creators industry in general. And it's not just hitting indie creators, it's also hitting mass market creators. There are people out there profiting by literally stealing other people's work, and the people doing that are often connected to really dark underbelly stuff. We're talking organized crime, we're talking human trafficking, we're talking drugs and all kinds of awful stuff that is happening in the organizations that are funding counterfeit deck production. It's not a victimless crime, and a lot of people think that it is. And if I can just be another voice out there saying, hey, this counterfeit thing, it's a huge problem. It's not just hurting indie creators, but I have seen announcements from at least 2 indie deck creators in the last couple of months saying that they're going to stop making decks because they feel there's no point, because their decks are being counterfeit. They're not getting what they need to be able to continue to print. And that is so terribly sad to me. Now, I am just stepping into the indie deck creator world, and I see this happening all the time, and it just breaks my heart. So the idea of this dupes is to help show alternatives so that we can hopefully put a bigger dent in that counterfeit deck market. As always, please be very careful where you purchase your decks. If you're purchasing from a third-party seller of any kind, it doesn't matter where, please make sure you're buying an authentic copy. I'm not aware of any authentic copies of decks being sold on sites like AliExpress, Temu, Shein, and Wish. Temu is especially rampant right now, and I've seen people think that they're getting authentic decks. You're not. At least that's my understanding. And of course, I can only know what I know, but I've never yet seen an authenticated deck show up on any of those sites. So be especially vigilant there, but also be aware of any third-party seller. There are authorized third-party sellers, and some indie creators sell their decks direct on places like Amazon or Etsy. In fact, a lot of them do. But there are also people who are selling counterfeits and copies in those very same places. So if you're not sure, just reach out to an indie creator to ask. And I would like to ask that we all do everything we can to shut out the counterfeit market. It is doing so much harm, and anything we can do to support authentic purchasing, whether it's an affordable mass market deck instead of an indie deck, or simply just giving that particular deck a pass, it makes a difference. It makes a positive difference when we only support authentic work. And that's the main reason why I wanted to start creating this dupes series, just to show that there are alternatives. Okay, so boxing aside about counterfeits, obviously it's a topic I'm very passionate about. Let's share the overall savings. So if for some wild reason you were desperate for all of these out of print decks that I've covered, you were really lusting after the Tarot of Delphi, the Majestic Earth Tarot, Healing Waves, Fantastic Menagerie, the Alice Tarot, the Mesquite Tarot, the Heart of Fairy Oracle, the Yonase Jaus, at least while it's out of print, the Color Mage Oracle, and the Blood Moon Tarot, you would be saving, if you went for all of the dupes I suggested instead, a whopping $2,457.58, not including shipping. I'm just saying, these are great alternatives. So check them out. If you have other suggestions to dupe any of the decks that we covered today, drop them down below. Help the other people that find this video to find alternatives that may work. I suggested the ones that I felt were the best fit based on the decks I could think of or that were offered to me as possibilities. But if you have a better one in mind, or you know ones that dupe the vibes of any of these, drop them down below and share them with the rest of us, because I'm sure that there are other really great dupes to share with the community. So drop those down below. Please support all deck creators. Please support authentic copies. And thank you so much for watching this video. As always, an extra big thank you goes out to my YouTube channel members, my Unicorn fan members. Your support of what I'm doing here makes a huge difference. Please never forget that it matters. It matters, and I appreciate you so, so much. To everyone watching this video who likes, comments, watches the video all the way to the end, subscribes, comments below, all of that stuff, it really, really supports the work I do. So thank you so, so much. And until next time, may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye.